we all want to succeed. Why don't we all make that decision? Given the good that comes with motivation. But does this thing interest you? Because if you don't have interest, if you don't have drive, enough fire, you are not going to go far. If you hit a portal, you are going to stop. So that's why you need this engine, horsepower, which is the motivation. You might have the purpose, you might have the character. But if you don't know what you're doing, you are not going to cause that impact. That you might have the best constitution as we are, but do we have the best managed, well-run country? That's the gap. There is action.
What is it that I'm actually looking for?
Do we really know life?
Sure. Let me say intelligence. Emotional intelligence, social intelligence, financial intelligence.
So I believe it's important for each and every one of us to understand the rules that govern any arena of your life.
You are listening to The Revenge of the Forsaken Gods, a podcast that explores the human experience and seeks to create a blueprint for living using books, stories, movies, and conversations. And here is your host, Andrew Balongo Opere.
Welcome back to the Revenge of the Forsaken Gods podcast. I am your host, Andrew Balongo Opere. And yes, we're coming back from the break where we're trying to answer the question of, you're trying to seek traditional success and you're getting the money, you're getting the status, but you're still looking for something. It's not filling in that gap that you still can't put a name to. And our guest, Dr. Emmanuel Mango, who is the author of the book, The Good Success, How to Cultivate a Fulfilling and Impactful and Value-Driven Life, offers a framework that you can activate the good success in your life. And that was a question we asked before the break. What is this framework that you have created, and how did this framework come to be? Because everyone is starting to have their own definition of success.
Thank you, Andrew. So this framework, I would say, is in terms of, on a global view of the entire framework, it's a work of thinking, experimenting, looking, and analysis. But on each individual level, there is an inspiration behind it, and that's one of the things that we are going to discuss. The overriding things was, as I said at some point, that physics helped me to understand the concept of first principle. What are the basic elements? What are the unique or basic element of you able to achieve the good success, of a person to achieve the good success? So I was asking myself, there are many things that one could do to achieve success. There are fewer things that people can do to achieve the good success. There are even fewer drivers, key elements. Now on what are the pillars? So that was the thinking I was having with discussing this aspect of the good success. So there might be an element here and there. You might say it's not in the model, but the way I analyzed, I said, what are the 5 basic? I didn't say 5, I said, what are the basics? I would have loved even them to be 7, but when I did an analysis, I saw that once you have these 5 elements, then you should be able to achieve the good success. Beginning with purpose, which is the foundation, and I will talk about it. Then the second element being character before competence. Because as I've said, did you do it right? Did you do it right? That's, for me, if there is anything a person should take out from our discussion, to have that ring in their mind, did I do it right, would be fulfilling for me, for people to have that one as a takeaway. So that is the element of character. Then the third element is this person has a purpose. He has a character to be able to pursue that particular purpose. But is he able? Does he have the skill? Is he equipped? Is she or he equipped to be able to pursue that purpose? So that is the aspect of the competency. So you can have a purpose, you can have character, but you don't know how to do what you're supposed to do. So that's the third element. Then, yes, you have purpose, you have character, you have competency. But does this thing interest you? Because if you don't have interest, if you don't have drive, inner fire, you are not going to go far. If you hit a portal, you are going to stop. So that's why you need this engine, horsepower, which is the motivation. Now to move you have a purpose, you have character, you have competency. You need a driver. This is the motivation. So that's how motivation comes in. Then finally, you have the motivation. I know people have been motivated, and I usually give an example to try and help you see that motivation is not the same as doing. You might have identified a certain girl whom you really love and you want to get married to them. So you have the motivation inside you to get that girl to be your spouse or wife. That's a motivation. Something inside you is burning. You have the motivation. But motivation is not action. Until you go and sit down with a girl and have the conversation, you will have a purpose, you'll have character, you'll have the competence, you'll have the motivation inside you, but that's the end of the story. Until and unless you have the guts, the courage to take a step and talk to her and convince her, the rest of the story does not matter. That's why action is part of this matrix or equation. So those are the 5 elements.
Wow. And I see you've given it the acronym of PCCMA, so it's easily remembered: purpose, character, competence, motivation, and action.
Yes.
And as you're doing your research, how did you decide on each of these?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So beginning with purpose, first things first. First, as I said, I don't know if Andrew mentioned this, I love walking in the nature, looking at things. While I'm walking in the nature there, I see bees moving around, active throughout the whole day. I see ants too. I see lions sometimes when you go to the park. I don't see those dailies. But they are doing something in the ecosystem. Now science, even beyond looking at them, when you look at documentary, you see each of those animals or insects I've mentioned, they have a part they play in the ecosystem. So that means I looked at that and I asked, and when you read the book of George Orwell, Animal Farm, the old man at the beginning of that book, he was motivating the animals to come up with a revolution. One of the things he said about men, he said, man is the only animal that does not produce anything that is used by other animals. I think that's a paraphrase, but that's the message that he's telling these other animals that we need to rebel against man. All of us produce eggs here that are used by man, milk used by man. What does man produce for us? So that's in the animal farms. That's why Animal Farm is one of my best books. In fact, I was telling my son to start reading Animal Farms, who is 9 years. and he's reading, and we are all enjoying. We are reading it again.
But you see, even when I read it when I was younger,
Yeah.
I just thought it was a story about pigs and chickens. It was a nice read, but only until I read it again in high school was when I was like, oh, okay, something else is going on here.
Yes. So back to that story of purpose. So I was asking, okay, each one of the creatures in the ecosystem has a purpose. So that's where we should begin. In discussing this success, the good success, we should begin from this understanding that each creature has a purpose. Even leave alone creatures. Talk about this mic here before us that we are speaking into has a purpose to make us be able to communicate. This table where we have placed our pens and pencils has a purpose. What about man? If we are not convinced, I don't know. But me, I'm convinced, thoroughly convinced, that each one of us has a purpose. So the question of what is my purpose, how do I find my purpose? Now those are tackled well in the book, because I know those are questions. But at least I want us to first come to that point where we agree that each one of us has a purpose. Because I'm not convinced that a table that is made that has a purpose, but as a human being, you don't have a purpose. And so the animals will look at you and say, you are the only creature that consume without producing. That shouldn't be true for us. So that's, once I thought about that, I said, this purpose must be the foundational element for us to achieve the good success. And when you read the content of the purpose, you'll see that I've gone to a greater length to explain what is purpose, how do you achieve purpose, how does it relate to some of your favorite elements that you know out here, like vision, mission, core values. How does it relate? And I've given a framework which is also free in both on my website, also in the book, a tool that you can get into and be able to discover purpose. Because I know that's the foundation. It is the basis upon everything laid. If that is removed in the equation, nothing else will matter, because we'll be just meandering and wallowing in all directions without a guidance, without a direction, yes, let me put it that way. So that's why purpose is in this book.
And what's the name of the tool you said that you've provided on your website?
So the tool is called Purpose Clarification Tool. And I've used the word clarification there deliberately. And you'll find that also in the book. Because there is a debate whether is purpose discovered, is purpose created. I've analyzed all these things that people say about purpose, and I've been able to put it in the book so that you can be able to find a tool that will help you live a meaningful life. So, a purpose clarification tool. So the debate on whether is purpose created, developed, we can have it on a different day. But for now, let's say clarification.
Okay. You've shared how you got to activate purpose in your framework. And
yes.
What about character?
So character, I remember 1999, I was a house captain at high school, Utumishi Academy in Gilgil. A very good place, at least in my days. I still think even today. So we were ushering out Form 4s, completed exams, they are stepping out. So being a house captain, I was in the dormitory helping them pack and put their things together. A gentleman called me aside, very accomplished sportsman, played almost all the games, talented. Not seen a person like that who was, in terms of the number of games he was playing. He was talented, basketball, football, any game, name it. He was almost top in school. He called me aside and looked at me and said, Emmanuel, my life would have been better if I didn't live a double life. I knew the guy. I knew who he was. I knew his character. I knew that he's referring to his character. And that advisor stuck with me. Because he saw himself at that point that he could have been greater. Despite the fact he was the best in school, he would have been greater if he had character. He saw himself in that his level of success has been trimmed. He's been reduced because he didn't have the character. He didn't have the patience, the resilience, the persistence, the good conduct as a person with other teammates and himself. He didn't have that. So I knew from there that this thing called character is very critical for our success. But later on, I learned that yes, you can even go to the peak of the mountain, be it in terms of your career, be it in terms of family and anything else. But still, if the journey that you took to that mountain was not right, you'll still be haunted while you are there at the peak. You may want to retake the journey again, yet it might be too late. So the aspect of character gives you two things. One, it helps you enjoy when you have arrived, knowing that you did it right. But while you're on the journey, it gives you the resilience. It gives you the discipline to stay on that journey, because climbing a mountain is difficult. Many of us, if we are going 5,000 or is it 5,000 Mount Kenya? I think so. By the time you reach 3,000, you're asking yourself, was I chased from home? Can I go back home? Because it's tough. You need character to do the other 2,000 remaining. So you need character on the journey to keep you on the track. But you need character more so to enjoy the success once you have reached there. So that's why the question, did I do it right, is a very key question. And that's how we identify that. That becomes one of the 5 key elements that we must put in the book.
At least in your previous point, you shared some questions about purpose. Maybe could you just share one question someone can consider adding character? Because character, I think, is something I don't think I've had a lot of Kenyan authors speak about.
Mm-hmm. Character in the sense of?
How someone can discover character and apply it. Because, in your chapters, there are many aspects like setting the stage for a value-driven life, a case for character, crack the code of character ethics to unleash its potential, character classifications, character development, the authority that matters most, paragons of character. Maybe you just mind just sharing just a little bit of one aspect of character that will just bring a little bit of clarity, because you've shared the benefits of applying character to success in our lives. Yeah. But how can we discover it like the way you've painted for purpose?
Wonderful. So there is an element there called character classification.
Yes.
Because what I've done in this book is not only to give you what these things are, but try to help you have a framework on how to acquire and make them part of your life. So that character classification is an element that I came across a paper written by Parker and others. They had segmented character, and when I looked at other people who have written character with an intention, I looked at those other writers with an intention, which one of these framework is easier to use, adopt by readers and people who would want to embrace this aspect of character. I came to a conclusion that framework offered by Park and others it's one of the best frameworks. So what it does is divides character into 3 elements. There is what you call the internal element, intraperson, you as a person. There are elements let me start with the external one, which is interperson. So that one has elements of how do you relate with other people. Accountability is one of those elements. So the purpose of trying to group them, because when you look at character traits, there are so many. There could be maybe 100 or so. I don't know the actual number because I've not seen a research on that. And like I've seen some research on elements like emotions, that there could be 50, 300. Even character traits are so many. So the purpose of trying to group them into these 3 is to first break it down, to give you a framework, to begin and see, do I have character in my personal life behavior, me as a person? Do I have character in the way I interact with other people, which is the second element? Do I have character in the way I do my learning, that is the intellectual level? So there is the interperson, then there is the intellectual level. So at the intellectual level is where we have things like wisdom. Do you have the wisdom to do you apply wisdom in your learning? There is the aspect of, say, intellectual humility. Are you humble that despite the fact you have 7-10 degrees, can you be taught by ants? Leave alone ants. Can you be taught by a toddler? They teach patience like nobody else. So that's intellectual humility. So in that category, so those are the 3 categories that I see that if you get those 3 categories, you'll be able to at least group these character traits, the many character traits out there, and break it down, that all I need to do is to be able to have the sincerity to learn, the humility to learn, which is intellectual character. Then you'll have how you interact with other people. Then in your personal conduct, like something to do with responsibility. It is you as a person. Are you responsible or not? So that's the way I've grouped character.
Wow. I think,
does it come out?
Yes, it's coming out. And I think that's a very powerful chapter. I think religion, society, our tribes don't go in depth into talking about character, yet they demand
of it. Yeah.
And it's easy to highlight examples of it, but the practice of it is not really obvious.
Yeah, outlined.
Yes.
Yeah, and as I said for this book, I want the practice. Because that's what's going to make a difference. Because as even there are sections in the book where I've said time for action. Just to remind you that you might have read many books, but you are the way you are because you didn't do what they said in those books.
Yeah, so that we don't become that person that didn't do. Like I take a small break so that even as we come back, we're going to explore the power of competency, motivation, and action. Thank you for tuning in to the Revenge of the Forsaken Gods podcast. It's a space where you're willing to make mistakes and learn from them. It's a space where you're willing to investigate and heal any limiting beliefs within you. And it is also a space where your true self can be brought to the surface and developed, and you will get to witness that reflection of your true self. Happy listening. If you have heard an idea that you think will move you forward in life if you apply it, I would love to hear it in the comment section below. Now back to the episode. Welcome back to the Revenge of the Forsaken Gods podcast. I am your host, Andrew Balongo Opere, and before the break, we experienced the first two parts of the Good Success Framework, which was P, starting for purpose, and then C, character. And we are now remaining with competency, motivation, and action. And yes, Dr. Mango, please take us through competency. What do you mean by that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Being in the space of training and staff development, HR space, I've been privileged to recruit, employ people to serve. When they come, I remember this gentleman, I would just call him Tom, very promising, very articulate in the interview as he articulated himself and what he can do. So we give him the work, and now he has passed the interview. It is time to execute all these good things that he has told us he can do. Now we are waiting for him to do. Another example, again, I remember is a place where I go for to be shaved at the barber. There's this lady was very talkative. Her work was clean up after the barber's done the shave, So she was very talkative, gave very good stories. But when it came to actual clean up and do the aftershave stuff, she was clueless. And at some point, I said to myself, and I think this is a story that is actually in the book. I told myself, I need to tell her that although she's talking to me and we are laughing, what she's doing is not what she's supposed to be doing. She's applying the wrong spirit, applying it at the wrong time. She's not using the right temperature of that. I don't know how to call it, the cloth.
Yes,
Yes. And I told her, but she was not listening. She was too much into herself. She would just brush it and laugh off. Then I asked I said, okay, I have two choices here. And I think that time I was in the process of even writing this book had begun. I said, I have two choices. I would say when I go to that barber, I don't want to be served by this lady. But secondly, I said, I can as well be served by her so that I can understand how clients feel and experience when they are served by a person who doesn't know what they are doing. And I think I stayed there all this time and I said, I'll be served by her because I want to have that experience. When you are served by a person who doesn't know what they are doing, how do clients feel? And of course, it was not pleasant. But that's the point. That's the point of this aspect of competence. That, as I said, you might have the purpose, you might have the character. But if you don't know what you're doing, you are not going to cause that impact. So that's why I took it upon myself that as we are putting this book together, the element of competence has to be there. For a long time, we have had a model of thinking about competence, which is skills, knowledge, and ability. And even myself, I've used that model, but a number of things have changed. One, the world is evolving and changing. So things always change. Two, I felt that model has a shortcoming. So I looked at that model and remodeled it. So instead of skills, knowledge, and ability, I have what I call UTT model. U stands for universal competences. Then T, the first T is technical competences. Then the final T is talent. Now, looking at motivation, which we have not discussed, but also looking back at purpose, there is a connection between purpose, motivation, and talent. So Whereas in the old model, they talk about abilities. In most books, even research, that ability is always silent. They can give a liner definition of what ability is, but you have put it at the back burner. In this book, I bring talent. I give it a focus, because what I say, a competent person who is not talented, rather a trained person being trained in an area of where you don't have talent is running on one engine. Being trained in an area that you are talented is running on two engines. So my all effort and focus is to remind people that yes, you can be trained in anything. You can be anything. But if you want to be exceptional, if you want to be extraordinary, you have to be trained in the area of your talent. So I know some people here say, oh, Mango say, if you are not talented, you are not going anywhere, you are doomed. So the first thing, and I've taken time to talk about in the book, is to help each one of us to understand that we are all talented. We just have a misconception of talent. We look at runners, actors, and maybe IT persons and say those are talented. But the people who are in the media, that is a talent. So talent is, all of us are talented, but we have just misclassified. We have just taken a small section. If you are not an artist, an actor, runner, athletics, then you say you are not talented. To be a doctor, you can be talented. You can do operations as a doctor. Another doctor cannot do the kind of operations that Ben Casso was doing. Not every doctor can do. So there is talent there. There is a level of talent. So that's why I shine this torch on this T, the talent. That in as much as you can tell me that you can be trained in anything, I don't refuse. You can be trained in anything. But the only challenge I tell you, you will not be extraordinary if you are not trained in the area of your talent. So if you are seeking to play at the top of your game, then also seek to be trained in the area of your talent. So that's the final T. And I think because of time, that's the point that coming from that story I experienced at the barber, and talking about why I've brought in and emphasized this aspect of talent, it shows why this aspect has been included in the model of PCCMA.
So maybe she's in the wrong career, because apparently she tells stories. So she should be in a more environment that tells stories rather than cleaning up, because she's not competent at that.
Yeah.
And what about motivation? How is motivation an impactful part of this framework?
Thank you. And that's, I've said that there is a connection between motivation, talent, and purpose.
Correct.
And the reason why I say that is because, I don't know, maybe it's there, but it's rare to see bees, lions, and ants unmotivated. I think they are always motivated. Carrying weight 50 times, ants. Science has shown they can carry, it's like you, Andrew, carrying 50 people of your same weight. An ant is able to do that, does that the whole day. Why do bees, lions, and ants never run out of motivation?
Good question. Someone might argue, but for them, that's all they have to do. So for them, life is simple. It's just a one-track mind.
But when you give one track to people, they'll get bored. They would want to do more. So it goes beyond just being one-track mind.
Maybe animals don't get bored. I don't know.
Why do human beings lack motivation?
Maybe because of limitless choices?
Limitless choice. Wonderful. So, remember we are looking at the core pillars for this model that will lead us to the good success. So looking at that, I thought, and looking at nature, is for you to do something well, do it long enough, do it to the best of your ability. You must be motivated to do that thing. Now the question comes, where do you get motivation? Is it a decision that I make? Now I'm going to be motivated about X. Tomorrow you wake up and say, now I'm going to be motivated about recording a podcast and producing YouTube videos. Is it a decision?
I think it's partly a decision, because as I'm thinking from...
Partly. I like the word partly. But if you say it is a decision, we all want to succeed. Why don't we all make that decision? Given the good that comes with motivation.
Doubt, maybe, of the ability to achieve that success?
But that's not the motivation. The motivation is, and I think what the book also helps you is to distinguish between motivation and obligation. What most people talk about when they bring this aspect of motivation, they are talking about obligation. I've paid you X amount of money, do that work. So they call money in that context the motivator. I've paid you enough money, why aren't you motivated?
So it is not money that motivates you, it's something else. So you're reframing it and calling it obligation rather than motivation.
Yes, that's obligation. I've paid you some money, pay me back by doing what I requested you to do. So people look at motivation. People confuse obligation and motivation. So we always incentivize. We always give money incentives to employees so that they can pay back by doing that work. So if your boss pays you, he expects you to do the work. But let your boss not confuse that he has motivated you.
Okay, makes sense.
Let's just have an agreement that you paid me, I'm obligated to serve you and do the work. Let's not confuse that with motivation.
Now that you've said that, it makes a lot of sense to why stereotypically in government offices, they generally don't seem motivated to execute when you look at their behavior. But there are those few individuals in that office that they serve like, oh my goodness, this is... I'm serving someone.
Yeah.
I'm changing someone's life.
Yeah.
I'm not just giving them a driver's license. I'm not just giving them a document paper. You can see that attitude, and it's very different from the person who's just like, I'm doing you a favor.
Yeah.
By me giving you attention to give you this government document.
Ile pesa nililipwa haitoshi. Pesa, what they have paid me imeishia hapo. Now this is my extra energy. So for a long time, and even myself, I've actually, to confess, to understand fully this topic of motivation is when I was writing this book. Because I thought that you pay somebody well and you expect them to to be motivated. But let me give you a small example. And I think I've said this before. Have a reception. Let's simplify for the purposes of this conversation that this reception has only 2 roles. 1, welcome, smile and welcome the guests to make them feel at office, you would say, to feel welcomed, make them feel welcomed. That's his work. So, assuming that he has not been doing his work well, and you figure out as management, I want to motivate this employee, so add him a 10K there, payment. So do you want to tell me that tomorrow you will wake up and find that person smiling and enthusiastic, greeting clients?
He may be for a small amount of time.
So does that person go to greet client in his mind saying, my boss yesterday gave me a check. Oh, Mr. Andrew, I'm happy to see you. Because he's remembering that big check he earned yesterday.
No.
So what is this motivation? For a long time, I've discovered we didn't understand this motivation. We mistook obligations that have paid you more X, do work X. Motivation is an inward fire. So,
so motivation
is an inward engine. What switches it on? If everybody knew, would be rich. Because we would just go around switching on.
Yes.
Why would Cristiano Ronaldo train for 4 hours a day? Or not even, let me talk of a person I've heard him talk about. Michael Phelps, the U.S.
Swimming
champion.
Olympic champion.
That guy was doing 4 hours of water every day. Christmas, holidays, Sunday, 4 hours of being in water. How much money would you give me to be in water for 4 hours? Even if you bring the whole world. I'm not going to do that. What switched on his engine of motivation? So those are the things we think about here. To think about motivation in a deeper way. That it is connected to your purpose. It is connected to your talent. If you're operating within that area, then motivation becomes quick. That's why studying science to some of us is difficult. But some people will not only enjoy studying that science, they will study it. When you leave the class, they will go do another extra hours. Nobody paid them. In fact, they are going. Some of us are going to the field. Them, they are picking a book to analyze that. So that's what's motivation. So when people now, later on, because we are used to these quick solutions, if you sit here and you say, I want to motivate my employees, nowadays I look at you and say, okay, how are you going to do that? If you tell me that your employees are not engaged, I want to be surprised. They ought not to be not engaged. Because they are doing something they don't love. How do you expect them to be engaged? You need to whip them. You have to be there constantly to remind them because they lack the motivation. You have to be there mobilizing them. Do this, do that. Stop. Now jump higher, jump 5 meters. Because it's not their area. They don't have they have to have external motivator, which is a reminder, which you are going to do. So because we got into this space where we say, I can do anything I want. I want. So people got into spaces, all sorts of spaces. They reached there. They didn't come with any fuel, but they didn't come with any water, but they want to make the grass greener. It won't happen.
Yeah, so your explanation makes me realize that is the cause of micromanaging. Where the manager is stressed and also the employees are stressed because they don't have the right motivation to do the work that they need to do. And the manager is trying to figure out, how do I get them to execute on what they need to be executing on?
Benefits, more money.
So I'm assuming you have a good framework that will help guide that process so that they can find their own internal motivation to act.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, that's the case. And I'll just leave that one for the readers.
Yes, they'll explore the book. So
to explore the book.
Order the book so that you can read the framework provided and figure out how you can get motivated.
Yes.
And yes, let's unlock the last one that a lot of people don't talk about, but it is the key differentiator between people that do and people that don't.
Yeah.
The key to unlocking living a meaningful life, action. So what do you have to say about action, Dr. Mango?
I love all the things I've been talking about in up to this point. But those are just words. If you want to make a change in your life, then you have to consider the things that we have talked about. Whether it's a workplace, whether it's your personal life to begin with, workplace, nations, or world. If you want to cause impact, you have to take the things that we have talked about, purpose, character, competency, and motivation, and put them into action. Or else, everything we have talked about up to this point is just stories. But the difference is made when action takes place. I've said in the book, the laptop you touch, the books you read, the clothes you put on, it's because somebody took action. That's why you have them. Otherwise, you won't be having any clothes now. You won't be having any book to read. You won't be having a podcast or any other medium to listen without action. So we have to go to that extent to bring action into place. Because as a strategist, I was surprised that about 80% of the strategic plans which are done are never implemented. And that doesn't surprise me in a way because we have very little to show for it, especially if you say, for example, in organizations, in nations, we've been just keeping things moving, not reinventing, because we don't want to take that step, uncomfortable step, and cause the change that we need to bring. So even when you look at what this book is calling us to, is not to polish up your suit. In a way, this book is saying you might be putting on the wrong suit. Because many books would tell you that maybe you just need to dry clean your suit. What this book in a way also is telling you that you might need to put on a casual wear, not a suit. So action is going to be the impotence that is going to drive and bring the change to each one of us, and that's why action has been put here. And there is a framework for action. And I think the two elements that are very critical that I've mentioned in the book, one is the drivers. What are the drivers of action? And then the last one is the vital ingredients of action. Those two are very critical. So what will help you to become action-oriented? And what ingredients must you have in place for that action to breed action? So those are the two elements, again, as I've outlined in this book. So that we move from words, Like in Kenya, we usually have this joke that we have the best constitution in the world. Now the challenge is on action. So this action is big, is important. You might have the best constitution as we are, but do we have the best managed, well-run country? That's the gap. There is action. So we might have a good book, good content. You might also read it. You might read it or listen to our conversation. But until and unless you take action, it is just a good book there. And it will be a good book always, but you will not be a better person doing more. And that's what we want you to get, to go beyond a good book, to get to the level where you are a good person doing more.
Wow. And indeed, this lines up with your purpose of inspiring people and organizations to mean meaningful lives, because your life cannot be meaningful if you don't act on the information that you've been given by people in your life, your tribe, your society, information that helps you move up or grow. Thank you for tuning in to the Revenge of the Forsaken Gods podcast. This is the end of part 2. We will be having part 3 next week. We shall be exploring how Dr. Mango came up with the name for his book, the lessons as a result of putting the book together, and what strategies he used in order to have the book in its final form. See you next week.